Hey guys, welcome once again to Illuminating Leadership, your go-to podcast for leadership in all its forms, with stories and advice from industry and community leaders around the globe. I'm your host, Beth Johnson, and this week I thought we should interview the man who influenced my husband's heart-forward leadership style, his dad, Doug Johnson. Welcome, Doug, to the podcast.
Thank you, Beth.
So great to have you here. And I'll tell you what, everybody, in my opinion, Doug is one of the best storytellers and certainly a master orator. And so rather than even tell a bit of his career story, I'm going to have him do that. But I do want y'all to know that he has two fabulous sons, of course, one of which I'm married to, two grandkids that are with us today, one unfortunately deceased, and three beautiful great-grandchildren. So he's got a lot in his life that still keeps him busy. So Doug, if you would start us off with giving our listeners just a brief chronological synopsis of your career.
Okay, Beth. It started early. I was in high school. As a matter of fact, I was a junior in a very small town. We lived outside of town on the farm. I'm a farm kid. The town's name is Rugby, located in central North Dakota. In fact, the geographical center of North Dakota. And I got a call from my vocational agriculture teacher if I was interested in working at the local radio station. And my reply to him is, "What's that? What do I do?" Well, he said, you read the news and read the weather and give the temperature and the station call letters and some commercials and play music. I said, "I've never done that before. How do you do that?" Well, he says, "You learn."
Yep.
So I finally said, "Okay, I'll try that." And it went from there. I got paid for learning how to do a job I had never done. And through the process of it, found out I really liked it. This broadcasting stuff, you're talking to yourself and a microphone all alone in this one room and wondering, are people really, really listening to this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as a result of that, I spent just over 15 years in radio and television, doing a lot of different things. From Rugby, I was fortunate to go to Minot, and there I went to work on radio, and then was invited to try out doing news on television. And I thought, oh my, what have I got myself into now? I had a good mentor there, a fellow that had been on television for many years, and he took me under his wing and basically taught me how to look at this red light on this camera in this studio, and you've got a bunch of lights on you, and go from there and do the newscast or whatever it is you're doing. That was the early days of a broadcasting career that I thoroughly enjoyed. It got to the point where I worked myself basically out of radio and was doing mostly and almost all television from the news angle, being a reporter, but also doing online, or not online, but on camera, newscasts, most effectively at 6 and at 10 o'clock in the evening, which I had done both in Minot, North Dakota, and also in Bismarck, and also in Fargo. So it was a great run. Got out of that, went into marketing experiences. Happened to be at a drug and alcohol treatment center in Mandan, North Dakota, where I did marketing. I was the marketing director for them for a number of years. And from that proceeded into some other sales positions, both in public broadcasting for Prairie Public, located out of Fargo, but also with studios in Bismarck, and worked there for a number of years doing underwriting.
I have always found your career to be so fascinating. And I love that you started that off with, I got paid to learn. Um, because that is kind of the best of scenarios, right? You get to learn and then test your own strengths and will and weaknesses and your limitations and get paid to do it. Which of those do you feel that you led the best and why?
I think in broadcasting, and probably more in the television end than in others. I recall at a particular time thinking to myself, okay, I'm sitting behind this camera with the red light on and all these uh, big lights lighting up the studio. I wonder if people are listening. And then it occurred to me that there are a lot of people who sit, at least at that time, and maybe it's the same now, who sit in front of the television set and say to themselves, okay, tell me what's happening today.
Mm-hmm.
And who may not look at this newscast from a standpoint of, well, it's kind of information, and this person is reading or doing this newscast with whatever stories were selected to run on this particular newscast. But I think that when that finally occurred to me, it also occurred, then I have a responsibility of doing this properly, doing it honestly, of reporting the news, not the opinion.
Yeah.
Because back in the day, I recall when television news was specifically news, not the presenter's opinion. Big difference.
I miss those days.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, when there was something other than the news done that involved an opinion, they called it an editorial.
That's right. They did. And so you knew the difference as a viewer.
These are my thoughts that I have on this particular subject or whatever it may be. Big difference. And I happen to think that today there's a lot of people that forget that. There's a big difference between what the news is, what exactly happened, and what somebody thinks will happen as a result of that action. Big difference.
Big and very insightful. How difficult was it, or maybe it was easier, how to get the facts of your story? Like you said, dig in, do a little more research, so that because you've got the responsibility to give the facts of the story, not your opinion, to your viewers. Today we've got the internet, and my first thought was, oh, it'd be easy to kind of look that up and research your story. And at the same time, the internet is riddled with untruths. And so how did you go about doing that research to ensure that you led your community and you led your public to the facts?
The key is in the source or sources, not what somebody thinks or just happens to say. But for example, any particular story, whatever it may be, where there may be differences of opinion, then you check out those differences of opinion. If you talk to one person, two persons, three, four, whatever it is, if there are certain claims that are met, those probably require a follow-up and double checking. Is that information correct? Am I repeating information that's correct, that can be backed up by facts? Or is this a thought that somebody is throwing into the interview? Sometimes very difficult to discern the difference because you're relying on information that's coming from another source, whether it is a live human source or something that is read or printed.
That's interesting. So you were in a position to discern their own how do I say this? Editorializing versus fact, right? Are they giving
Absolutely.
you their Okay. How hard was that?
It was difficult. It was very difficult because it also involved a portion of trust. This person who is giving you this information as a reply to your questions, you're hoping the information is correct. And again, that's why in some cases, you have to think, I'm going to follow up on that. I need to check some other sources or some other data to see if that is correct. But in the end, somebody somewhere, wherever you're getting your news, print or electronic or social media, somebody somewhere is making the decision of what they will put out. What kind of a story will it be?
Right. So is it fair to say that you could actually parallel that community viewership leadership to traditional offices today? If you're the leader and you've got a team of people that are saying XYZ, it's your responsibility to get to the truth versus their own opinions and how that's impacting the team on the whole, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I looked at it from the standpoint, it's my job to find out, is this information correct? How correct is it? And then make the decision, should this be broadcast?
You had mentioned that it kind of hits you at a certain point, that you've got a responsibility to do that. How heavy or light or did it weigh on you at all every time you went on air? And what did you do, not outside of behind the camera, to ensure that you delivered as that leader every single time you were called upon?
I trusted the people I worked with, which were other news people, who themselves were fantastic professionals. That, let's go get the story, make sure we get the story right with the information that we are given by the person or entity that we're interviewing. Or should it be changed, or does something seem strange here that I need to double check with the writer? Or at that time, one of the sources we used was Associated Press, of course, who would do news stories and publish them from on the wire, as they call it at that time. And every individual that's ever done it or continues to do it, I believe, has a responsibility to double check that, unless their idea of news is what they think or what they believe, right, or what they want to talk about. Very powerful thing.
Extremely, extremely powerful. And how would you advise leaders today who don't have that? What I heard was trust and collaboration, right? You had trust in your colleagues and faith that they would back you up and support you and call out things that were incorrect. And there was a great deal of collaboration to put the story on the air.
Yes.
What if a leader doesn't have that in their workplace today?
They're going to be in trouble, I believe, because I think they're going to be making a lot of mistakes that could be avoided just by checking with those who work in the trenches, those who have the on-site, person-to-person, day-to-day dealings with people, organizations, or whatever it may be, that can develop the sense of, okay, what's the information flow? Is it something we can rely on, or is it something we have to really watch and take care before we proceed on it?
Yeah. And I love that, Doug, because despite how we were, at least I was, raised in the trenches in corporate, we are not meant to do everything on our own. Just because you're a leader doesn't mean that you are accountable and you do take responsibility for the good, the bad, and the in between. But that doesn't mean every single minute of leadership is meant to come holistically through you and you alone.
I think leaders really need to be information collectors, because leaders make decisions. Well, okay, as a leader, am I going to base my decision on what I happen to think or what I feel? Or am I going to base my decision on the information I gather from those persons that may or may not be in my organization or any organization that I ask to have input into this decision that I need to make?
That's good. That's good. How important was the role of that mentor that you mentioned for you in learning all of this?
Absolutely very important, because I learned through that the sense of, hey, if you're going to report the news, make sure it's the news. Make sure it's as correct as you know how to make it correct by checking sources and et cetera. I think that's where it began for me. because as a matter of fact, my training wasn't particularly in the journalistic world. I began doing it as part of the work that I was doing, that I was getting paid for to learn.
Mhm.
So I learned it from the ground up. I learned it from the back room to the front room. And it was impressed upon me, if you're going to do this, then do it to your best ability. And if you're going to do a story that you're going to use on radio or television, make sure it's right, as correct as you know how.
I also appreciate that you said that. I work with young leaders now, and I know that our now generation for me is amazing. I love them. They've got a lot to offer, but like every one of our generations, we want to make our mark on the world. We want to jump in and say, I can do it today. Don't get in my way. And I love that to some degree, because that's drive and that's passion and that's the good form of ambition. But you're maybe like the fourth or fifth person I've interviewed who has emphasized, don't necessarily jump there. Start from the ground up. Learn everything about your craft that you can. And why did that work for you? When you look back on it now, how did that benefit you in the long run in your career?
As I began to understand it was, in many cases, these people had years of experience. And I think there's the key.
Yeah.
They had the experience. They had gone through the ups and the downs, the left and the rights, and all of the things that can occur on a daily, hourly, weekly, monthly position. Since that time, I guess I've always been a believer, check with the people who work there, wherever it is. There are people that work, I know, for leaders, wherever they may be, that are more than willing to let the leadership know what they know. In fact, I think they're, waiting for the leadership to ask, what do you think about this? Or what do you find over in your part of this business in this organization? And I believe that most people are willing to add to the information bank if you just ask them, because I don't think I don't think that their intention is to all of a sudden say, this is wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, and besides that, I need more pay.
What a great exercise too for developing your own intuition, because I'm often asked that. It's like, I don't know. How do I know? Like you said, was that gut feel in my head, or is there something really wrong here? And if you tap the experience of those who came before you, they can provide you that information that allows you to assimilate the difference between, oh, it's just rolling around in my brain, to there's something here I've got to pay attention to. And I want to ask you a question about that, but I also want to plug you just a little bit right here. I credit you for my love of question asking and curiosity, because, I've known you now for 30 years. And when I was young, I had questions about everything, but was also terrified of everything. And every time I'd bring something to you, that was one of your first responses, was just ask, right? Just ask a question, be curious, go get the information you need to make a decision for yourself.
I don't have all the answers. I have more questions than answers.
Mm.
And even today, there are certain things that honestly terrify me too. And I'm thinking, okay, this terrifying experience comes from not having information that I need to know. So therefore, I'm going to go out. I got to find some additional information here, because if I don't know something, I'm probably going to be afraid of it.
I might just steal that from you. That is fantastic, Doug, because you just really distilled down an issue that everybody deals with. I am scared of this. Why? And you just said, it's because I don't have enough information. I don't know enough. And that can be applied in so many situations. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great gem
Quite
you
often,
dropped.
if I fear something, it's because I don't know much about it,
Mhm.
whatever it may be. If that fear is there, that fear is of what? Uh-oh, What's going to happen to me if I don't know this, or if I make the decision based on whatever? I need some additional information here to make a correct decision.
Perfect. Now, you mentioned going to people that have the experience and who've learned already the hard way. So what's a hard lesson that you learned? And I will ask it in two parts, in your career and in life, that you think could help people in general or people in their careers today.
I guess some of the toughest lessons I learned really were probably on the sales end of it. Again, a fear thing. Now, I know there's a lot of salespeople, very, very successful. I don't know if they're afraid or not. I always think back to the story of somebody asked Johnny Carson about whether or not he was afraid, before the program went on. He says, I'm terrified every time I do. Again, because he never knew what was going to happen. He knew he was going to interview. He probably had some ideas of what he was going to ask, but he didn't know for sure what was going to happen. So his nervousness was really at peak before the program started. I found that in the sales business, I would assume, boy, this person probably knows more than I do, and they're going to say no. The worst word in the world for a salesperson, no.
No, exactly.
But it was my fear, not theirs. I
Good
begin
point.
to understand is a lot of the people, if you're in a sales situation, that say no is because they don't have enough information.
And I was always told if you are nervous or fearful, you're invested. It's not necessarily a bad trait, right?
Every time I went on television and radio, every time I cued the mic or somebody in the control room turned that camera on, I was nervous, very nervous.
It's so cool that you mentioned Johnny Carson, because he is one of the greats. And to sit on this side of the television, you look in thinking, man, this guy is a genius. He is fantastic at pulling personalities. Yet for him to say, guys, it never gets different. I'm nervous every time. That's a great lesson for the rest of us.
His blood is as red as everybody else's.
Isn't that great?
He was nervous.
That's fantastic.
He was very, very nervous. Once that red light come on that camera, within 30 seconds, I'm okay. Because now it's time to do what I do. And the thing that I've learned about that I've tried to use in other things too, rather than into a television camera, is to not talk at people or discuss with them. And if somebody is really watching and paying attention, a lot of them will know, this person isn't coming across really all that freely.
One of the next questions I wanted to ask is how the experiences that you learned behind the camera actually affected your marketing and sales career. And I will say this, most people are terrified of the word sales. Either they don't want to be put in the position of saying yes or no to a salesperson, or, divulging their truths, or they feel like it's an icky word. I can't be salesy. I could never do it. But from listening to your stories and learning from you over the last 30 years, it is not something to be feared. And it's actually just a way of communicating. And I mean, is that correct? Or would you define it differently?
Oh, it's an information process. People, I guess I've heard it many, many times, and those who are more professional in the sales field than I am, talk about people buying with emotion or selling with emotion.
Yeah.
There's certainly some excellent gifted salespeople. And there are gifted salespeople that aren't selling anything but ideas. Those also are salespeople. You look through history, and there's any told number of people who are very good. And I don't know this for sure, but it's my belief that most of them wound up telling people what they wanted to hear, rather than telling them information that they could base some decisions on.
Interesting.
People want to hear good things. They want to hear, my life is going to be better. my life is now going to straighten out because of what you're just telling me. And a lot of the times that's not the case at all.
Ah,
They
okay.
are telling you this to change your concept, your beliefs, and to get you on their side.
Well, and I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you. I'm so sorry.
No
I
problem.
wanted to have you relate that to managing versus leading then, because what I'm hearing is I know that sales exists in leadership. Leadership is influence. You are influencing other people, and the way you go about it can be vastly different. One can be very dictatorial, very managing the situation and the people by, as you just said, telling them what they want to hear to get them on your side, or the harder way, leading, sharing what they need to know to improve themselves or a situation, and then allowing them to actually make the decision for themselves.
Yeah, I think you just said it. I think you just said it. That being dictatorial or being what would be the other good word, conversational. You can either rule over people or help them to achieve what they want to achieve. Which, and by the way, I think if they're your employees, they want to achieve the same thing you want to achieve. Want to
Exactly.
make
And
more money.
I'm not sure why I think I am. I was going to say, I'm not sure why so many leaders forget that, but having been there, I, to some degree, understand, because you're beholden to people above, below, and across from you. You're beholden to projects and deadlines and ROI. And sometimes the thought of taking the time to be more influential and conversational than dictatorial is just one more overwhelming thing to add to the list, right?
Yeah, and one of the things I think back on working for various people in various fields, but thinking quite often, I want to help this person as much as I can, because the more I can help this person, I'll bet the more they can help me. And I'm sitting there and I'm waiting for them to ask a question. What do you see that probably we need to do in this particular area?
Right.
Because it was an area I worked in and worked in very closely, very deeply. And I'm sitting there wondering, I have some information for you. Sometimes I would send a note and it got lost, I think, somewhere. But I think that a lot of, if not most employees, want to do that.
Yeah.
They want to be a part of the solution. Whatever problems there are, and there always are problems, but be part of the solution. Just ask me.
Okay. So,
You'll know right away if they have any skin in the game,
yeah.
depending on their answer. And it's free information for you. You don't have to go out and hire somebody to find out that information for you.
Well,
It's right there.
there's no third party study required here, right?
No, just ask them.
So it's a chicken and the egg question for you then. Whose responsibility is it to start the conversation when there's a problem? Is it the employee to go to the employer to say, hey, I've got something that can help you? Or is it the employer, the leader, to engage their people for that help?
Probably a two-way street. There may be problems going on that the employee has no knowledge of. Absolutely none. And there may be problems going on that only this specific employee may have seen it, that management or leadership does not know about. In that case, I would hope that employee would say, oh, by the way, red flag here. I see something that could be a problem on down the line. I have this fix for it, or I don't know for sure what the fix is, but I think it should be taken a look at. Most often, I would think that it falls on the shoulders of the leadership, because they will know more about the business or whatever they're in than most of the employees.
Yeah, they have an into the big picture. They have been in
Absolutely.
the boardroom and understand the final goal, what results you're trying to achieve. That's a good point. Good point. A little different question. When during your career do you remember feeling the most content, the most comfortable in your skin, the most joyful in what you were doing? And why do you think that was?
Oh boy. I know I have experienced those moments, and it's been in different parts of my career. For example, I think of one many times I felt that in broadcasting, in radio and or television, because the presentation went well or the interview went well, particularly those interviews that may be live. You know, it's that sense of accomplishment. Wow, that went good. It felt good. I think I asked the right questions, et cetera, et cetera. Working at a drug and alcohol treatment facility, of seeing the difference from somebody come in the door, probably accompanied by law enforcement officers, and maybe even in shackles, to seeing them leave sometime later smiling, saying, "Thank you. This has been an incredible experience of my whole life. Thank you, thank you, thank you." Unbelievable, you know, to think, hey, I was part of that. Maybe a real small part, because I wasn't a counselor, but I was part of that. I'm part of this institution, therefore I'm part of that person's life. Yeah, those types of things, to where, as everybody likes everything to go well, you know, when things go well, to do that. Or selling a car. When I was in the automobile sales business, and finding a person that, you know, wanted to deal in facts, say, hey, Kate, what will this vehicle do? You know, what makes this thing better than that one over there? This type of thing. They come in there, they're very realistic. You know, the deal is made, and we get there and they say, hey, thanks. You were really, really helpful. It made my decision easier.
But what I also heard was that there was joy in two different places. There was a lot of joy when you were your best self and authentic, and things went really well because you were you and it just worked out well, right? And then the other, which is contrary to what we're experiencing in the world today, and I think part of that is because we're all seeking this and we've lost the way to do it, is how we positively impact the lives of others, not sit and position ourselves across the table from someone that says, you're wrong, I'm right, and I am not going to discuss this. I think, and this is, listeners, this is my own personal opinion, take it or leave it, but I feel like we all have it inside of us to want to genuinely help others do better and succeed.
I believe that, because I don't recall really meeting a person yet who didn't want to succeed at something, whatever
Right.
it is. I don't care whatever it is. Backing up a little bit further, it's taken me a long time and I'm still working on it, but to be yourself.
Yeah.
Just to be yourself. Most people can spot phonies because they look phony, they sound phony, their ideas seem a little strange, whatever. I don't do well taking on the persona of some person I'm supposed to play in a play. I'm not an actor. I've never trained in that area. Can't do it. But just to be myself. I have found out on many, many occasions that people can pick up on that. They know when you are yourself, or if you're
BSing them.
something other than.
Yeah.
You know.
I have to say, I hear you saying, yeah, you've struggled with that all your life. That struggle you've shared so openly and honestly with me and with your family that I probably drive people around me crazy talking about that, from what I've learned from you, which is it's just complete and utter bullshit to try to be anybody but yourself. Because one, you do a disservice to you do a disservice to your loved ones. And you're right, people around you can tell. They might not be able to say, oh, she's outright lying to me, or he's trying to pull one over me, but they can feel it. And when they can feel it, they'll distance themselves from you. And all of a sudden you create assumptions and misnomers, and there are barriers put up in the relationship that needn't be when you were just yourself, even if it was hard to admit, right?
Yes.
Was there anything in your life that was where you really impactfully learned that lesson, where you said, all right, I just got to lay it on the table and I don't want to, but here's who I am, take me or leave me?
Oh, yeah. The thing that pops into my mind, I abused alcohol, and then alcohol abused me. And then I got to the point where I took advantage of myself and everybody else around me, in every situation around me. And it wasn't until, I guess I would use the term, hit the wall and have a moment of clarity to ask the question, honestly, what is wrong with me? What is going on? And for the first time in my life, saying, I need help because I have no idea what to do. None. And that moment of clarity, looking back and saying, I don't know if I've been successful in anything. I certainly have been successful in this person-to-person thing, because people I'm around, they get angry. I use them. I lie to them. I manipulate them. And it wasn't until coming to the truth of, I need some direction. I need some help here with some questions. Am I going to be this way for the rest of my life? Or is there something I can do where I cannot be so unhappy, so angry, so lonely, that I'll just die lonely? And that was the point, in my life where my whole life was up in the air. It was scattered. All my thoughts and beliefs were in question. I questioned other people and what their motives were. I became a lover of things and a user of people, which is probably, the worst in both areas. Couldn't understand why. Part of the reason was I hadn't been honest with myself. And if I'm not honest with myself, I can't be honest with you or with anybody else. It does not work that way. And I tried that for years, and it did not work. And it frustrated me. And I was pretty angry about it too, by the way.
Mm-hmm. In what ways did your life change when you realized, I need to ask for help? I'm not doing this well on my own.
How did my life change?
Mm-hmm.
In every way possible. I found out very shortly that my way of doing things, my belief of things, got me into big time trouble. It did not work. Right back to this, I told myself things that I wanted to hear. I told myself, well, this is right, that's right, and you are wrong. I wasn't honest. I wasn't honest with anybody or anything.
When you were in that moment, was your body, your brain, your spirit, was something telling you, this doesn't feel right, but you still held to the position that I'm okay and I am telling you the truth?
Yeah, I have to say that I'm okay to justify what I've been doing and continue to do. How can I not say this is right? This is good for me. This is the way that I want to be.
Gotcha.
I have to make the information stand up to my side, not to what other people are saying. Doug, what's wrong with you? Do you know what you just did over here? Or do you know what you said? No difference. I'm okay. You don't understand. You don't understand. People don't understand me, and I have a lot of bad luck.
It was a lot of deflection and a lot of luck is in this. It had nothing to do
Absolutely.
with
Yeah, absolutely.
ownership
I
and
refuse to take
yeah.
responsibility for me or towards anybody else. I refuse. They're on their own. I'm on my own. You're on your own, which is not the case, obviously.
It's a very lonely place to be.
Very extremely. I had no clue of how lonely I was. None whatsoever.
How many years have you been sober?
It'll be 45 in October.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Congratulations. And for our listeners that struggle with any kind of addiction, I hope you know that this man, I hope you know that you can do it, right? He's done it and is one of the strongest, wisest people I have in my life. So,
it's a lot like anything, I guess, if you want to change something in yourself, is you have to be willing.
that's true.
Willing to admit you don't have the answers, willing to admit it's okay to ask other people what the answers are or could be, and a willingness to proceed along that way, and a willingness to say, yeah, I was wrong. That's not the way to do it.
And that's
It never will work.
That's fantastic advice, not just in addiction, right? That's relationships. If you find that you're going through one relationship after another, if you find you're being overlooked in the workplace, it applies to everything, doesn't it? The first place to look is inward.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely. It does. It applies to life. The good, the bad, the ugly. To me, in my opinion, yeah, it all applies to life.
it does.
How you deal with yourself and how you deal with other people, particularly those that are closest to you.
I am so glad that you agreed to be my guest on this podcast. I knew that organically something beautiful would come of it, and it has, just as I expected. A couple more questions before we go. On a very positive high note, what do you think your greatest accomplishment is in life? And I will separate that from career to personal life. What are your biggest accomplishments?
Oh boy. Part of that sounds selfish.
Because we were taught that it's supposed to feel that way. You can't talk about yourself. It's too prideful.
Well, the big thing for me was to sober up, to understand that, yeah, I had not been honest with myself. I had not been honest with other people, etc. And then to understand, I don't have to do the things I did before again. Mm-hmm. I don't have to do those things. That I can make a difference. I can be a different person. I can like myself. And I found if I can just begin to like myself, I can really honestly begin to like other people. And I guess it was being able to reconnect with my family. Yeah. At the time, my ex-wife, but become my wife again, and our two children, our two sons, and obviously to all the relatives I have, friends, neighbors. It was a chance to begin to know them, because before I didn't really want to know them. I wanted them to know me. I'm the most important person on the block, which is not the case. But I began to ask them, how are you doing? How's your life? How are things going for you? It's really good to see you. Simple things like that that I had lost. I didn't do that. I wanted them to ask me, how are you doing, Doug? Boy, you really look good. You're really a successful person. When inside, I was the most unsuccessful person that I knew at the time. But that, I think, would to reestablish my humanity with humanity. That probably was really overall what I think about it the best, and which continues today, and it's really neat.
That's one of the best life lessons anyone could learn, isn't it? Doug, if you could go back and give your 18-year-old self one piece of life advice, what would it be?
Do not be afraid. Because one of the things I remember so well through this whole process to get where I got to was growing up being afraid. And not for any specific reason in my childhood. It was a super sensitivity that I had that, as I understand it, I was born with. It was overly active, overly sensitive, beyond reason. And it's one of the reasons I think back at the age of 18 or even before, I had thought about going to college. And finally it comes down to, no, I can't go to college. It's too frightening. What if, what if, what if, what if? And I never talked about my fear ever to anybody. I did things in my life that were earlier than anybody else. For example, going to the field, being raised on a farm, going to the field when I was 10 years old. And I had begged my dad when I was 9, Dad, let me go into the field. I can follow my brother around with the tractor. Doing stuff like that. I thought that the answer to everything was to do things before I'm actually ready for it, age-wise or mentally. And I did that wherever I could, because to me, that's what made the bells ring. That's what give you the blue ribbons and the first place and all of the other things. And that wasn't the case. It was my lack of I don't know the right word for it. My lack of some concrete feeling of I'm going to be okay. I didn't feel that. So not being afraid.
And I was going to end with that question, but now I have to ask, so you're this kid at 9 that says, I want to go do. And there are kids today and adults today that feel that same way, yet also have no understanding of self, or that fear resides in them. So how do you make the decision to go to the field or stay home from the field, and discern whether it's, just true desire to put yourself forward in the world, or you're trying to compensate for something? But how do you know that?
For me, it was trying to compensate. I guess I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know why or what it was called, but I was trying to compensate because I had always felt less than. Therefore, if you're feeling less than, you have to do more than. And that's what I was trying to do.
That helps a lot. It helps understanding what the why is behind that decision, like everything else, right? I'm feeling less than, so I've got to prove myself, versus I'm feeling bold and confident. I really want to take this on and try it. Yeah. Two very different places to come from.
Going to the field, at 10 years old, boy, I'm going to feel good after accomplishing that. And I enjoyed it, but it was for the wrong reason, because I never did feel confident from it. I didn't get the bells and whistles and the blue ribbons and the lights shining. It didn't happen, but I kept trying. And it took many years for me to understand that it never would happen.
Yeah. Oh, thank you again for your honesty and authenticity and sharing of yourself and your life. I just can't thank you enough and tell you how much I appreciate that. Before we close, are there any final thoughts that you want to share? Anything that we didn't cover that you kind of hope we'd touch on?
Life is good. It really is good. I used to think that it was other people's responsibility to make me feel good. Yeah. I laugh about it now because it's really silly. But I was waiting for other people to make me feel good, and that's not where it's at. I guess you are. I guess you are what you want to be. I can lie to myself and say I'm doing just fine, et cetera, but down deep, when I'm honest with myself, no, that's not the case. But to feel some serenity, to feel that things are okay. There's a reason I'm here on the earth, and it's a good reason, and I can do good. I can help other people, which I believe, is probably one of the number one things to do. if I can continue to do that, and while I'm doing that, learn more about how to do that more effectively, yeah, that'll be good.
Well, there you have it, folks. We have everything we need inside of us to succeed and live a good life and positively impact others and find that joy. Doug Johnson, thank you so, so much again for being a guest on Illuminating Leadership. I do hope you'll come back because I know you've got about 100 more stories that we could talk about. And I'd love to hear them. And I think our listeners would too. All right, you guys, as always, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of Illuminating Leadership. Until next time, bye.
Thank you, Beth.